Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor 2 at welterweight. Is this a built-in excuse in case McGregor loses? So we have a potential rematch between a lightweight who has a featherweight belt and a lightweight who has a beer belly at welterweight. If the UFC officially announces the Diaz versus McGregor fight today, March 19th, they both have well over 3 months to get in shape and can be healthy at 155 pounds. After the first fight, Nate said he would have been a lot sharper if he came in at lightweight. Nate even said that he wouldn't have been touched with Conor's left hand if he had a full camp and was able to drop down to 155 pounds. So why a rematch and why at welterweight? I don't agree with it, but the way I see it, the UFC is scheduling the rematch because the first fight, allegedly according to Dana White, sold about 1.5 million pay-per-view buys. The hardcore and the casual fans will probably buy into the rematch. Yes, there are several more deserving and even more competitive fights out there for both guys. But I guess the UFC wants to strike while the iron is hot. Both of these guys have huge loyal followings that will support them to the end. However, you have to wonder how many times the Irish fans can afford to fly to Vegas to support their guy. Now, why at welterweight? This is crazy to me. The easy answer could be that Conor wants to avenge his loss, which took place at welterweight. However, what I think is that the UFC and McGregor want a ready excuse in case Conor loses. The guy goes through hell making 145 and should be fighting at lightweight. But if Conor loses to Nate at 155, it makes McGregor look like a top 10 fighter at the 155-pound division, and the money train comes to an end. If he can't make 145 and he can't beat Diaz, a guy who lost to the champ RDA at 155, then the hype train stops. But at least they can prolong the inevitable if Conor fights at 170. The UFC can go into damage control and start blasting out propaganda that the Diaz versus McGregor fight was a true welterweight fight. He is still the king at 145 or even at 155. And of course, if he wins, he's back into having all the options. Another possibility would be that the UFC wants to save the 145-pound championship fight for the inaugural MMA fight at Madison Square Gardens. If MMA is legalized in the state of New York, you could have Frankie Edgar versus Conor McGregor, which would be a huge event on the East Coast. Either way, it all seems like bullshit to me. As a fan, I want active champions defending their belts against the best contenders. I don't want to see Holly Holm waiting for Ronda Rousey until Ronda decides to come back to the UFC. I like and respect that Holly fought Misha, and I don't like that Frankie and Jose have to sit around and wait to fight for the featherweight belt because the 145-pound champ wants to avenge a loss that took place at 170 pounds. Don't get me wrong, I'll watch Diaz versus McGregor too, but I think what the UFC is selling is bullshit. Basically, in a nutshell, this fight will be a meaningless fight unless McGregor wins, which will put him back in the driver's seat. If Diaz wins, it's just a throwaway fight that means nothing because it's at welterweight and it's a way for the UFC to generate a lot of money. Let me know what you guys think and have a great weekend.